This is how to raise your prices in your wedding photography business this year. Raising your prices can be terrifying. This video isn't about setting your prices for the first time, but it's about raising it, moving it up to the next level. And that is a terrifying prospect because you probably have some clients, your business is going, and the idea of raising them, at least sometimes, can be slightly terrifying because, will anyone hire me ever again? Are my prices going to be too high? Are they too low? And the reality is that there is no exact way to figure out whether your prices are correct or not. And if there's anyone that gives you a specific, formula to do that, well, they are wrong. However, that doesn't mean that you can't confidently raise your prices. And here are 6 ways to confidently raise your prices this year. Number 1 is be confident in what you provide. Now, there's an important distinction. I'm not saying just feel more confident, just conjure up some confidence, but I want you to actually be more confident in what you are selling. And I think that's going to go a long way for you to be able to raise your price. And I'll explain it this way. I remember when I first started in wedding photography, I remember looking into albums, what people charged for wedding albums, and it kind of seemed crazy to me because my impression was that these were kind of average albums that people were selling for a lot of money, and it didn't make sense to me. It wasn't until I started looking into some albums that I wanted to sell, and when I started looking into them, I was choosing the highest quality paper, really thick albums, beautifully handmade design, really expensive kind of French velvet exteriors, all of these things. And when I looked at all those materials, I looked at how they were being made and how they were being printed, I felt really confident about what I was giving to my clients because I knew it was high quality. I knew that they were going to love it. If you're kind of doing a half-butt job in your business, then you're not going to feel confident in raising that price. If you feel really confident and you're saying yeah, you know what? I put so much work into my business to make a great client experience, you're going to feel confident in the prices you charge, and you're going to feel more confident in raising that price, especially when you make improvements to your business. So are there areas in your business, in your client experience, in how you deliver photos, in the quality of images you provide? Are there some areas that you could improve in? Could you take a course? Could you do a mentorship to raise the level of your own work? And so then you could feel confident about raising the price. Number 2 is know your costs. You have to know what it costs you to run your business. And that sets a baseline of what, if I go below this price, I'm losing money. And we don't go into wedding photography to run a charity. This is a business. This should be a profitable business. I put down, just to give you an idea, these are not my costs, but kind of a kind of conservative estimate to give you an idea of what I'm talking about. While you're estimating your costs, it's not just, how much the USB costs or how much your SD card cost. You want to include your hourly rate as well. I think when you first start shooting weddings, you charge $1,000 for a wedding and you're like, I make $1,000 for a day. Well, that's not true actually at all. There's work before to be done, there's work on the day, and there's work after, and then there's costs throughout that whole thing. So what's important to include in costs is your own working time. And I would suggest is setting kind of an hourly rate. And you can kind of play around with this. For this example, I am setting the rate at $50 an hour, just so it's kind of easy for math. So here's the example. I'm shooting a wedding day. That wedding day takes 10 hours. Editing, let's call it 20 hours, 3 hours to do some client work beforehand, consultations, going over schedule, all that stuff. So all that added up is 33 hours. And if we multiply that by $50 an hour, you're looking at $1,650 just for your time. So that's a line of costs. The other cost could be maybe you have to hire a second shooter. You have business expenses, software that helps me design my albums. I have a calendar, I have accounting, I have a Lightroom, all of these costs. And if you were to add those up and then divide them into the weddings, you would have a certain number. So $100, I'm just guessing. Advertising. This is not just paid advertising, but for example, if you spend time posting photos to Instagram, choosing your grid, all of that time, you should be paid for that time, right? It's not free work, but I'm just throwing $200 in there. And then gear expenditure. Gear is not free and you have to replace it, usually every 4 to 5 years. And so I put $300 for every wedding. Another way to guess that would be to estimate how much it would cost just to rent the gear that you would use to shoot a wedding. And then you could put that as an example. If I add up all of those costs, I'm looking at $2,750. And those are just costs. That's not a business at this point. That is if I charge $2,750, and that's kind of like all the costs that I have, I would not have a business. I would just own my own job because there isn't profit above that. And that's how a business works, especially when you're in the early days, when you're at maybe your pricing is a little lower, to know what your kind of break even is. So if someone emails you and says like, "Hi Luke, like I'm really excited about getting married and I love your photos and my budget is $1,900." Well, I can look at that and I say, okay, well, they can pay $1,900, but I really do need $2,750. It gives you kind of a baseline to feel confident in your pricing and confident in maybe I need to raise my prices. Maybe my margins are too thin. Maybe I'm too close to that number and I need to up that a little bit. Number 3 is be honest with yourself and figure out which segment of the market that you're in and then optimize for that. I just wrote down, I have 5 different kind of market segments that I came up with for wedding photography. Okay, so let's go through them. The first one is the bargain hunting. This is people, asking for a discount a lot. You as a photographer, you're looking to shoot a lot of weddings, kind of maybe at a lower price. Number 2 is called the mega middle. This is kind of the largest segment of wedding photographers. This is where you have lots and lots of competitors competing over kind of the average price. Then you have what I'm calling the like higher end middle. So this is still like the big, middle of the market, but it's the higher end of that. And that's, I think, when you start getting into like people calling themselves artists and they're being a little bit more unique. So they're still kind of within that average range, but they're starting to kind of really distinguish themselves as being a little bit more special than your average wedding photographer. Then I have the expensive category. People might describe you as they're expensive, but worth it. They might call you an investment. And the last category here is luxury. Now, I feel like there's a lot of people calling themselves luxury photographers. This is a small market segment of luxury wedding photographers. I'm talking luxury. I'm talking like these people are starting in the $20,000, $30,000 per wedding day. So this is the high end, the top end of the market. And why this is so important to kind of know which market you're in is that it can help you inform you as you raise your price. So for example, it's really helpful to kind of know where you are in case you are in the kind of bargain market and you're at the top of the bargain market. That's not a good top of the market to be at because by definition, people in that market want a bargain. So it's more advantageous to be at the bottom of that market rather than the top. So if you're going to raise your price, it's actually maybe better to even market yourself a little differently to attract a different type of client. So knowing where you are, knowing what your clients are not only willing, but expecting to pay is really important because with each one of these kind of categories that I laid out, each of them have different expectation. If you're marketing yourself, for example, as like one of these expensive wedding photographers and someone inquires and you say, I'm $500, they are going to be confused because there's a certain expectation that they have. If you have marketed yourself in a certain way to look like you're in one of these markets, but your price doesn't match or your price is too low, sometimes that actually can bring a red flag and someone's like, oh, like, why are they so cheap? And in that kind of scenario, it's actually really important for you to raise your prices so your price has a better correlation of the quality and the type of photography that you provide. Number 4 is be desirable. Now, this is where you need to forget about what you like doing. You need to forget about what you like, how you like to shoot, just for a moment here, and be an expert in what your clients want. And if you're able to figure that out, you're going to become more and more desirable. Like, for example, we have florists tend to really like when I shoot their work. And it's not unusual for me to go on a wedding day and the florist see me and be like, oh, I'm so excited about, you shooting this thing because I'm so excited to have these photos. I've learned and I've spent time figuring out what florists really love. And so when they hear my name or when they're hearing someone like, oh, what kind of photographer? Oh, you should get Luke because the photos are going to be beautiful because of this and this and this. You can really make your photos more desirable. And when you do that, more people want you to photograph them. And when that happens, it's supply and demand. There's only so many wedding days per year. And if you have more and more people wanting you to photograph them, then the reality is that you can raise your price. Number 5, if you raise your price, you've got to stick with it, at least for a little bit. One of the worst kind of mistakes you can do is fluctuate your price without kind of testing the market a little bit. So especially if you're nervous about raising your price, say you raise it $500 and then the next person that inquires, is interested and then doesn't book. And then you can be like, it's because I raised it $500. That's why they're turning me down. And the reality is that that's probably not true, unless they specifically said that price is a problem. But even if they say price is a problem, it could have been a problem for $500 less as well. So it's important if you do make a price change to stick with it for a while and not go back down. You want to change your prices not because out of fear, but because out of a solid business decision. Number 6 is raise your price by raising your price. I know that sounds kind of dumb, but it's true. You don't need permission to raise your price. And I think as a business, it's important to raise your price. And I think you should even do it every year, even if it's a little bit. The reality is every time you shoot a wedding, you are becoming a more experienced and a better wedding photographer. And so it's okay if you raise your price every year. I want to give you the permission to do it, especially if you start seeing an increase in bookings and you're booking more and more every year. This is a really good sign that you need to raise your price. So I think sometimes people can feel bad or a little guilty about raising their price. And maybe it's just why do you need to just raise your price? You're being greedy or something. I don't know. But that can be an honest feeling. And I've definitely felt that at different times of my life in this business. And what I've learned is the more that you charge, the more you can do. When I was first starting out and I didn't have much profit, I couldn't do much kind of extra things. Now that I make significantly more than I did when I first started out in wedding photography, I can do a lot more things. I can be generous with my couples. I can invest in much better equipment. I can invest in doing things for my clients that I could not have imagined that I could have done before. Hopefully, as you look at raising your prices for this next year, that some of these things are going to be helpful in you feeling more confident to raise your price, and not just to make more money, but so that you can make more money and create a better experience and better product for your clients.